We're going to talk about one of my favorite cooking methods, which would be sauteing. So, sauteing is really high heat and just a little bit of fat and oil. So, we're moving now into the cooking methods that involve oil. And remember, oil and fat interchangeable here. So sauteing means to jump, and in sauteing you want to continuously move that food around in the pan. I have another very short video that's only about 2 minutes that demonstrates a chef, and he shows you that method in addition to how to get that flipping technique, which my students generally see me do in the classroom. Rice is always a good thing to practice with, although just be careful about practicing in your house and throwing rice all over the place. You don't want dry, and we're talking dry rice. You don't want dry rice everywhere. Flipping a pancake or a grilled cheese sandwich in the pan is also a good thing to practice with. So this method is going to cook food rapidly. It's really high heat. So the food is going to be in there for a very short period of time. When we've talked about mise en place, we've talked a lot about pre-prepping food items and making sure that everything is ready to go. If you're sauteing and something hits the pan, you have something else that's going to go in there and you're still need to cut it up, then that first food item is going to be overcooked. So timing is really going to be important for a method like sauteing. You're not trying to cook something down to death. It's light, it's fast, it's fresh. It might even still have a little bite to it. So very tender items, very tender cuts of meat, chicken, fish, or seafood, and it's really good for vegetables. So to mise en place for sauteing, this is a copy on this PowerPoint, which you will have access to this actual presentation as well. So you can get to these links here. And in that, you'll learn how to properly heat a pan, which is a review that you have seen before, and then also Chef Burton's video on how to saute. So make sure everything is mise en place. Make sure that everything's cut into appropriately sized pieces. You can't saute with like really big, thick chunks of things because it's hot and it's fast. Make sure your pan is the correct size too. You can't load it in. You can't overload it. You don't want a huge pan with a couple little items because they'll burn, but you don't want a small pan that's overcrowded or overloaded because you'll take too much heat out of the pan. So recovery time is going to be one of our big vocabulary words for this particular part of the unit. And recovery time is the amount of time it takes for a pan to get back hot when you've added cold food. So food is cold. And when you put cold food in the pan, that heat really drops down and you need some time for that heat to come back up. And so you can't crowd that pan and make it too full and too piled up with stuff, or you won't have proper cooking. So you want to go to a high to medium heat. It depends on what you're cooking, and it depends on how much food you have in the pan. You use just a little bit of fat. That pan has to be really preheated. One thin layer of food, and you brown it really well, and you continuously move it around. So another little review from our previous lesson here, making sure that you are preheating your pan with no oil, that you add enough fat to barely cover the bottom of the pan or not quite. Canola or peanut oils, avocado oil is really good. You want to use a really high smoke point oil because you want to really cook with a lot of heat there. Clarified butter is going to be really good. When the oil just very lightly begins to smoke, that would be a good indicator. It kind of shimmers around. That's how you know your oil is hot. The food should also be as dry as possible. So if you have washed something, make sure you pat it dry with a paper towel. And then, as I said in the last slide, making sure that everything's just in a single layer and not piled up. So flip foods, just as make sure it gets brown on all sides. Make sure it's allowed to get brown, and just keep flipping that food around. Stir frying is really similar to the sauteing. They're both high heat methods. They both involve just a little bit of oil, and they both involve stirring the food around very quickly in the pan. You do end up with a sauce sometimes with stir frying, not always, but you can impart different types of oils or liquids or flavoring items. Sauteing is or stir frying is used a lot in the Asian cooking, and one of the big differences is that the stir frying is done in a wok as opposed to that saute pan. So that's kind of the difference between the Eastern and the Western style of this cooking method. But essentially, both of them are really, really high heat, very small amounts of oil, and move food around quickly in the pan.